I want to pivot to this is a really big story. I'm sure you've heard of Francesca Albanese.
Yeah.
She's the UN rapporteur. For those who are not aware, the US government is sanctioning Francesca Albanese, who we say I think, should be getting the Nobel Peace Prize.
Nobel Peace Prize, 100%.
Exactly. Marco Rubio let the cat out the bag the other day. Today, I am imposing sanctions on UN Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese for her illegitimate and shameful efforts to prompt the ICC, action against the US and Israeli officials, companies, and executives. Albanese's campaign of political and economic warfare against the US and Israel will no longer be tolerated. We will always stand by our partners in their right to self-defense. The U.S. will continue to take whatever actions we deem necessary to respond to lawfare and protect our sovereignty and that of our allies. So again, for those who are not aware, Francesca, again, she should be the one receiving the Peace Prize. And I want to mention this from Chuck Modi, just as a reminder to everybody, your friendly reminder that this fascist, tyrannical, war criminal speaks for the entirety of the U.S. Senate. See, people forget this. Everybody voted to confirm Marco Rubio as Secretary of State in the Senate, including Bernie Sanders. And I remember I called this out when it happened. So a lot of this stuff that you're seeing taking place with foreign policy that Marco Rubio, is a part of. Also, he was a part of the attempted deportation of the Columbia student who was a part of the protest. That was Marco Rubio. But to this point, this is absolutely insane. I mean, Francesca is getting in trouble for doing her job.
Well, not just for telling the truth. I mean, that's the thing. She's not an irresponsible person. In fact, if you know anything about the UN, and I worked there for a number of years, she is conditioned not to seek controversy. She's conditioned to find the middle ground. She's conditioned. This is her approach. And oftentimes that leads to people saying that the United Nations is weak and ineffective because they take such a neutral position. And she's somebody who came up through the system. But the situation in Gaza is such that there can be no neutrality. I mean, it's at the point now where you have to call it out for what it is. There's no softening of the position. And this is a reality that's been manifested around the world as people recognize. I mean, it's funny that Rubio is singling out the International Criminal Court, but what about the International Court of Justice? I'd probably have to dig a little bit deeper, but since she's a UN official, I don't think she pays as much attention to the ICC as she does to the ICJ, which is actually the court that is derived from the powers of the United Nations Charter. But it wouldn't be the first time that Rubio, showed his ignorance. But I have to be careful because maybe she is, somehow attached herself to the ICC's jurisdiction on this. But she is just saying this is genocide. What's happening? It's genocide. There's no other way of putting, what I would ask people to do is take the time to go and research the history of the Warsaw Ghetto. The Warsaw Ghetto, Warsaw was the capital of Poland. And what the Germans did in the ghettos, the first thing they did is they took the Jews of Warsaw and they consolidated them into a single area, concentrated them. And then they began to transport them out. And then they began the destruction of the ghetto. Literally, everything that was done to the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto is being done to the Gazans of the Palestinians of Gaza. It's the same thing on a scale that's even greater. This is literal genocide. It meets every word. The Israelis themselves can't even defend this anymore. They will say, no, it's not genocide, but they admit, I mean, they have their soldiers are saying it's a free fire zone. We go in there and we're allowed to kill everybody. Everybody. We do without any consequence. None. I mean, there is a battalion, the 97th Battalion, and it's a religious affiliated battalion. It was created so that there was a vehicle for a particular brand of Orthodox Jew could join the IDF and still be able to, maintain their religious cultures. But it was hijacked by what they call the settlers on the hill, the Brooklyn Jews. These fanatics who come in from the United States and steal people's homes and all this. They came in and hijacked this. They had to be moved out of Palestine and sent to the Golan Heights because even the Israelis said these guys are just raping and murdering and killing, and it's out of control. But then they've taken them and they've brought them back to Gaza and they celebrate their activities. Now, this most recent ambush of Israeli forces hit the 97th pretty hard. It's a brutal but wonderful example of karma, if you ask me. I'm not supposed to promote violence, but the people who committed some of the most outrageous atrocities against the Palestinian people over the years were brought to justice by Hamas. But we have Americans there right now. Americans are there as contractors who are killing Palestinians with no consequence on videotape. They're bragging about it. This should be, the FBI should be seizing these videotapes and arresting these people, and they should be charged with murder and war crimes. But no, they're going to be given medals and paychecks, and because the Palestinians don't matter. This is what Ms. Albanese was talking about. This is what she's been trying to bring attention to. And now she's labeled, a practitioner of lawfare against the United States. Freedom of speech means something. Freedom of speech means you're free to speak. And if the United States is concerned about her words, then our response should be to put out better words. If we don't agree with what she's saying, then we need to say it better and win over the hearts and minds of people. But we can't because she's right. And so the only choice we have now is sanctioning, bullying, using the power of the United States to suppress and oppress. She deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. And if she doesn't get it this year, then the Nobel Committee should just disband.
Yeah, I saw she was on Democracy Now! For those who, I think that's the first interview she's probably done since this announcement was made. But just to show you guys how ridiculous this is, and shout out to the person who made this comparison, Trita Parsi. The man below is the founder of Al Qaeda in Syria. The U.S. just took his organization off its terror list and lifted sanctions on him. The woman below is the UN rapporteur of Israel and Palestine. The U.S. is about to impose sanctions on her. Let that sink in. So the guy on the left, that's Jelani, who they apparently put in a suit and gave him a haircut. And now the U.S. patting him on the back in Syria. He's leading regime change there. And then you have Francesca here. Like, it's just, I feel like I'm living in an episode of The Twilight Zone. This is absolutely insane. And some people are asking, like, well, how can you sanction an individual?
Well, I'd have to see what the sanctions are. There can be travel bans. There can be secondary sanctions imposed on people who support her. I'd have to see specifically what the sanctions are, but I would imagine that one of them is that she will be denied the ability to enter the United States. I don't know that, but I'm just saying that this is Marco Rubio. Maybe that's something that he could do, but financial penalties for people who support her financially. I mean, there's just a variety of tools available to that. We sanctioned individuals all the time. If you take a look at the sanctions list that we put out against the Russians, it's not just companies, but we target individuals as well. So, I mean, one of the things that they can do is by sanctioning her, for instance, if she were to create a charity to raise money for, helping the children of murdered Palestinians, because she's a sanctioned individual, anybody who contributed to her charity could be, criminally charged, things like that.
This is crazy.
Yeah, no, it's insane. Welcome to America. I mean, we've stopped being anything close, anything that remotely resembles what the founding fathers wanted us to be. We're not the purveyor of liberty and justice for all. We're not about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We are literally a terrorist organization that bullies people, murders people, promotes genocide, and then we do it in Orwellian fashion, where we just use doublespeak to disguise the crimes that we commit.
Yeah, and I wonder about this as well. I mean, you guys think about the optics. They invited Netanyahu in and had dinner with him, but they sanctioned Francesca.
Yeah. Yeah, but they didn't just invite. He showed up with a suitcase full of his dirty laundry, and he makes the Department of State clean and fold his dirty laundry. It's something that the United States State Department has always created a service. So let's say I'm a diplomat who comes over to meet with the president or secretary of state. While I'm here, my laundry will be cleaned, because you don't want to send your laundry out for security reasons and all this stuff to get dry clean. So the U.S. government will take and clean the laundry, and that's okay. That's legitimate. But what Netanyahu and his wife do is they bring in suitcases of their dirty laundry just to humiliate us. It's a pure alpha dog maneuver. Yes, America, we're letting the prime minister of Israel piss on us, literally, by bringing in his dirty laundry so that it can be cleaned by Americans to show that he is superior to us. This is what's going on. This man is a disgusting human being, the head of a criminal genocidal state, who doesn't like us. I remind people, he and the Israeli Mossad, they were the spy masters of Jonathan Pollard, who in the 1980s stole the greatest secrets of the United States of America. The code book with all the codes that we had broken, it cost us billions of dollars to do that. The American strategic plan to go to war against the Soviet Union if we were attacked by their missiles. He stole all this on the orders of the Israeli government, who received this information. And because they're the good friends of the United States, they turned around and gave it to the KGB. This is during the Cold War. They gave it to the KGB to get better immigration rights for Jews who wanted to leave the Soviet Union. When Pollard showed up in Israel, Netanyahu greeted him, and he said, our job is to squeeze everything we can out of the United States and then let the wind blow them away. That's the man that Donald Trump just invited into the White House. We're cleaning his dirty laundry, and we're just bending over to give him everything he wants. He's not a friend of the United States. He's an enemy of the United States, but for whatever reason, we've bought into the fiction that somehow Israel's the greatest thing since sliced bread when it comes to promoting American values. No, Israel's the exact opposite of anything America ever stood for.
Yeah, it makes me. It honestly makes me cringe, honestly. And I have to think about the timeline here. One more question for you, Scott. When I look at the timeline, how long is this conflict with Russia and Ukraine supposed to continue? I can't even believe it's gone on as long as it has. And then also with Israel and Gaza, does Israel and Gaza even get resolved under this presidency? Because Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu were talking about, we found a couple of countries to take them in. So they're talking about ethnically cleansing the land. They're
talking about emptying the Warsaw Ghetto. Is what they're talking about. Let's just call it what it is. Let's not pretend it's anything other than a Nazi-like elimination of a targeted population. That's what they're talking about. The bad news for Trump and Netanyahu is there's this organization called Hamas, and they're not losing. And they're just going to continue to fight. So this will go on for as long as Hamas can continue to resist. And Hamas has shown the ability to resist in sustained fashion. I mean, they're increasing the scope and scale of their resistance. So we'll see. I would even speculate that Hamas may be planning another October 7th type attack into Israel, not on that same scope, but just to send a message to Israel that you don't get to only come on to Gaza and fight, that we're going to take the fight to Israel, because this most recent ambush took place very close to the border between Gaza and Israel. So Hamas, instead of being driven into the center, is starting to expand its operations out. So I wouldn't be surprised if someday we wake up to find out Hamas took over another kibbutz, just to send a signal to Israel that, you don't get this. This fight isn't determined by you; it's determined by us. Russia. This is a conflict of existential proportions for Russia. Literally, a conflict that their survival as a modern nation state depends on the outcome. Russia can't afford to lose. Therefore, this war will continue until Russia wins. And Russia has made it clear that there's no calendar attached to this. The negotiator Medinsky said in Istanbul, the last round of negotiation with the Ukrainians, that it took Russia 21 years to defeat the Swedes. And they're ready to do that now. They said if this war could go on for another 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, whatever it takes, Russia will not stop until Russia achieves the outcome that Russia demands that must be achieved. So Russia will outlast Trump. They will outlast anybody in the European Union. They'll outlast Zelensky. And sadly, they'll outlast another million Ukrainians if that's what's needed. Ukraine's losing this war. I don't know why people don't quite understand that. Just because Russia's not getting the big arrows on the map, Russia's fighting a different war. To give you an example, 2 weeks ago, I think the casualty figure for the Russians was 156 dead in a week. Now, just so Americans understand, in the Vietnam War, when we started bringing home 200 American boys in body bags a week in Vietnam, it broke the back of America. So we're not talking about an insignificant number of casualties here. 156 dead a week is a heavy load. The Ukrainians in that same week lost 1,500 and some odd people dead. All right, so we're literally talking about, orders of magnitude. It's 100 times. For every Russian that dies, let me make sure my math is right, 156. If it's 10, it's 1,000. If it's 100, it's... Okay, so I'm sorry. So it's 10 to 1. For every Russian that dies, it's 10 Ukrainians that die. That's an unsustainable, kill ratio. For every Russian that dies, 10 Ukrainians die. And these are the numbers the Russians don't add into their calculations. For instance, the strikes that are taking place on a daily basis on the concentration of Ukrainian forces in the rear. The Russians don't know how many they kill. They drop bombs on a barracks, it collapsed the barracks. They don't know, so those numbers don't get counted. So the fact is the Ukrainian numbers are probably, several times higher than this, but 10 to 1 loss ratio. And Russia every month is bringing in 40,000 new troops. Now, if they lose 100, let's say they lose 200 guys a week. All right. So in a month, we're talking about losing 800 guys. Now, let's say it's a 3-to-1 wound ratio. So 8, 16, 24. Russia in a month is losing 3,200 guys dead and wounded. They're recruiting 40,000. Now, I'm just a simple Marine and math is not my forte. But even I know that if you're losing 3,200 and you're bringing in 40,000, you ain't getting weaker, you're getting stronger. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, are losing 1,500 guys a week. So we add that up, and they're losing more than they bring in. So Ukraine's getting weaker, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse for them. And another example, just to show how this happens on the battlefield. As Russia is moving in towards, there's a city called Pokrovsk, and there's a lot of fighting going around Pokrovsk right now. It's a sort of an important hub, communications, logistics hub. If it falls, it puts the Ukrainians in a bad posture. So the Ukrainians, in order to reinforce, they had to pull people out of the line. and they pulled them out of a relatively quiet part of the line in Zaporizhia. And they withdrew a couple brigades to send them up to Pokrovsk. It didn't work. They got bombed. They got killed. They didn't even make it. They're dead and all that. But when they pulled it out, the Russians were ready, because the Russians went, oh, guess where we're going to attack next? Right where you took the troops out. And now they're advancing there. And this is what's happening to Ukrainians. Every time because they lost all their reserves in Kursk. They went into Kursk last August, put 76,000 troops in there, and they're all gone, dead, finished. There's nobody else. There's no reserves left. So now what they have to do is they have to rob Peter to pay Paul. They have to pull people off a front here to reinforce a Russian success here. And as soon as they pull them off, because the Russians have overwhelming manpower superiority, the Russians begin to attack here. Now the Ukrainians go, so now they have to move people here to here, then the Russians attack. The Russians are putting pressure on the entire front. And this will go on for as long as necessary. And it won't stop until either Ukraine surrenders or there isn't a Ukraine left.
This is what they mean when they say till the last Ukrainian. They'll fight till the last Ukrainian.
Savvy, I wrote an article last in June of 2023, so we're coming up on 2 years, in my Substack. Finally, the Bull Charged is the name of the article. I would invite you and your audience to read it. I'll send you a link if you'd like, because I make that point there, that all this talk about supporting the summer offensive and all this stuff, the counter, because you remember in June, we're all talking about the great Ukrainian summer counteroffensive that's going to win the war and all that. It was always a joke. It's always been about sacrificing Ukrainians. And we cheer the loudest when the Ukrainians, like a bull going into the bullfighting ring, they cheer for all the people. The bull's going to die. You're cheering literally for the death of the bull. And this is what we've been doing for so long. We are cheering this blood sport. Ukraine has become a blood sport. If there's one kind of life in the world today that has less value than a Palestinian life, it's the Ukrainian lives. We claim to care about them. People say we care about Ukraine. People to put the flag up there. But we're responsible for the deaths of more than 1 million Ukrainians. 1 million. And it's our fault. Our fault. And now it's just going to continue to happen and go on. And then what's going to happen is that the Ukrainians will become, again, the equivalent of the people get mad at me when I say this, but I said early on that what's going to happen to the United States is we're going to become so numb about the atrocities committed against the Palestinians that it's just going to blend itself into something where we stop being disturbed by it. There was a time if the Israelis dropped a bomb on a camp and there was a man or a boy trapped inside burning to death, and we watched that, we were upset about it. There was a time if we had an audio tape of Hind Rajab begging to be rescued by the Red Crescent, and then she was murdered by Israeli gunfire, that we were upset about it. Every day, 147, 150, 220 Palestinians are murdered by the Israelis and the Americans in Gaza. People who are simply trying to get water for the children who don't have clean water, trying to get food for their starving family. That's their only crime. And they're being murdered to prove a point, to establish a presence. And that they're dropping bombs on schools. They're dropping bombs on hospitals. It happens every day. And Americans wake up, and instead of crying, throwing up, the normal things you would do when confronted with atrocities this level, we just move on because we're numb to it now. The Israelis have succeeded in turning mass murder into a mind-numbing exercise to the extent that because we can't absorb the pain anymore, we collectively just move past it. Fortunately, there are people like Francesca out there who continue to hold the moral compass up there and shine a light on this. But it's really disturbing how accustomed we've become to large numbers of dead Palestinians. And the same thing's happening in Ukraine. We've just become accustomed to large numbers of dead Ukrainians, and all the people out there that claim to be supporting Ukraine, they don't. We're not the friends of the Ukrainians. We have never been the friends of Ukrainians. People who claim to be the friends of Ukrainians don't know anything about Ukraine. We simply like Ukraine because they're against Putin. They're against Russia. but we don't like them enough to say, hey, maybe we should stop the killing. And we're just going to allow even Trump to show you the hypocrisy of this fat orange-faced madman. He claims he wants to stop the killing. So his solution is to give more weapons of death to Ukrainians, knowing that they're not going to change the outcome of this war. All it's going to do is require a more intense response by the Russians that will kill even more Ukrainians.
And to let everybody know as well, one of the things that Francesca Albanese stated is she named 60 companies that are directly profiting off of the genocide in Gaza. And it's not what you would think. Like, we all know, of course, like we talked about before, Palantir, we know about, the MIC, that type of stuff. No, I'm talking about tech companies. I'm talking about Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT here. Like, it's not all MIC, like it's companies that you wouldn't think of. And I just find it interesting that once she put that report out, now here come the sanctions.
Oh yeah, because that's Israel's Achilles heel, is the economy. If you crush Israel, why do you think we bomb the Houthi? We bombed the Houthi because they succeeded in shutting down Israel's second largest port, bankrupting it. That's why we bombed them. And they're doing it again now. They're sinking ships. They're strangling that. The Iranians struck Haifa, the largest port, destroyed the port facilities, destroyed oil facilities. Israel's in a lot of trouble economically. And what we can't allow, we being the United States government, is any notion of a boycott. Because the moment you're able to successfully boycott companies that do business with Israel's over. It's finished. It's finished. It's gone. You want the quickest victory in the world? Don't wait for a BDS boycott or the divestment sanction movement to tell you what to do. Research your own. And if every American woke up in the morning and said, I just refused, you don't have to announce it. Just do it. I refuse to buy from this company. I refuse. You don't have to make an announcement because you don't want ICE and the FBI coming after you. Just do it. And it will destroy Israel overnight. 100% destroy them overnight, because they can't survive without this injection of capital that comes from these companies that you speak of, from the American tax. Ted Cruz just talked about pushing a bill for $240 billion, $240 billion, that's with a B, dollars to Israel. Now, the last time I checked, was the senator from the state of Texas that just got slammed by a flood. And we still have people in North Carolina that have been slammed by flood. New Mexico is getting slammed by floods. People in Maui still are recovering from the fire. We have American infrastructure problems. And this America First senator wants to send $240 billion to Israel. That's the crux of the problem here, that people are willing to sacrifice America for the benefit of this postage stamp sized nation that's practicing genocide and doesn't stand for anything that is reflective of American values. Israel doesn't have a constitution. Israel, so you can't. It's not a republic. They don't respect the rule of law. They don't respect international law. Their military is mass murderers. They are committing genocide. They don't believe in free speech. We can just go on and on and on. And they don't like us. That's the other thing I just want to remind everybody about. They don't like us. They disrespect us. They're not pro-America. They're anti-America. USS Liberty, Jonathan Pollard, the theft of American nuclear material, the disgrace, the way they debased American Marines in Beirut. We can go on and on. Barack Obama's White House was totally saturated with Israeli listening devices, spying on the President of the United States. So was Donald Trump's White House the first term around. So was Joe Biden's White House. The Israelis spy on America more than any other nation in the world. And we give them all of our technology. They still go to steal the ones that we don't give them. It's the biggest threat to the national security of the United States. And yet Ted Cruz wants to send them $240 billion. Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, who should be protecting us from Israel, says that his number one priority, this is the director of the FBI, is the security of Israel, not America, Israel. Dan Bongino, big loudmouth dude on, I'm so America, I'm so pro-America. My highest priority is the security of Israel. It's almost like these people are all Manchurian candidates. If you remember the Manchurian Candidate, the movie, I forget the name of the guy, Dan Parcell is the kindest, sweetest, most kindest gentleman in the entire world. That's what they were programmed to say. And like once you become in the U.S. government, they flip over the Queen of Spades or the Queen of Diamonds or Queen of Hearts, and Israel is the greatest nation in the world, and we must do everything we can to secure Israel. No. Israel is the worst thing that ever happened to America. It's destroying America. They've taken over America. They've debased America. Every American has the blood of Palestinians on their hands because of the state of Israel. Every American, me included, you included, we all collectively have the blood of Palestinians on our hands because at one point or another, we didn't do enough, or we were silent when we should have spoken out. We have disgraced ourselves because of the state of Israel. And we have to be careful now because they've weaponized American speech. We'll be called, I don't know about you, I'll be called an anti-Semite for what I said here tonight. And that's like being called a racist. It's like, oh, you're a bad person, you're an anti-Semite. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm just anti-genocide. I'm anti-nations that are opposed to the fundamental values that are supposed to define the United States. I'm against nations that openly advocate against the United States. That's Israel. They openly do it. They buy the U.S. Congress. Hey, Sabby, I got a good idea. Let's create a political action committee. We're going to call it the American-Russia Public Affairs Committee. And we're going to go to Russia. We're going to go to Russia and we're going to meet with Russian oligarchs and we're going to get them to give us billions of dollars. And then we're going to come back here and we're going to say, I want to spend $100 million to buy Congress on behalf of the American-Russia Political Affairs Committee. You don't think there would be any problems with that, do you? You don't think the FBI might get a little worried about that? And yet that's exactly what happens with the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee. They brag about spending $100 million to buy the United States Congress for the state of Israel. And there's no problem for this. I mean, come on now.
Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.